Bruce Lee, nurturing a dream and finding a way to make it come true. Chapter 1. The dream that started with a restless heart. In every legend's life, there is a beginning. A moment, sometimes small, sometimes ordinary, that later reveals itself as the spark that ignited everything. For Bruce Lee, that spark wasn't a dramatic prophecy. It wasn't a master proclaiming him chosen. He wasn't the universe handing him destiny on a silver plate. It started with chaos, restlessness, and a teenage boy who didn't know where he belonged. The boy who couldn't sit still. Hong Kong. In the 1,940 seconds and 1,950 seconds wasn't a peaceful playground. It was a noisy, crowded, unpredictable world. A place where the rich lived behind walls and the streets devoured the weak. And Bruce Lee, he wasn't rich. He wasn't protected. He was quick-tempered, rebellious, always in trouble. His mother used to say he moved like fire, brilliant, bright, impossible to control. The boy who would one day become the world's greatest martial artist was first known as the kid who couldn't sit still. Not for 5 minutes, not for one. He fought in the streets. He challenged older boys. He ran with crews that Hong Kong parents warned their children about. He wasn't feared. He wasn't respected. But he refused to be invisible. And maybe that was the first sign that a legend was forming. Not out of greatness, but out of hunger. The first dream, not fame, but control. To understand Bruce Lee's dream, you must forget the image of the movie star, the ripped physique, the nunchucks, the yellow jumpsuit. Before all of that, Bruce Lee wanted something much simpler. He wanted control over his own life. Not to be tossed around by the world, not to be overwhelmed by anger, fear, or the chaos around him. He wanted mastery over himself. So at 15 years old, Bruce walked into the famous school of Wing Chun, and everything began to change. His Sifu, Ip Man, looked at him and saw what few others saw in that rebellious boy. Potential, discipline, waiting to be shaped. Fire, waiting to be pointed in the right direction. For the first time in his life, Bruce felt something he never felt before: direction. It wasn't fame. It wasn't a dream of Hollywood. Not yet. In that wooden room, with the smell of sweat and wood dust, a young Bruce Lee discovered what it meant to devote himself to something bigger than impulse. Martial arts wasn't simply combat. It was structure. It was philosophy. It was the beginning of discipline. It was the beginning of his dream, the second dream, a new life. But dreams don't grow in straight lines. They twist and turn, reshaping themselves with every season of life. When Bruce Lee turned 18, trouble finally caught up to him. One street fight too many, one risk too dangerous, and suddenly, his parents made a decision that would change the world forever. Bruce had to leave Hong Kong. A one-way ticket. No promises. No plan. Just a restless young man sent across the ocean to America with $100 in his pocket and a future that no one could predict. For many, this would have been exile. But for Bruce, it became the soil where his dream would grow roots. Seattle was not glamorous. He washed dishes in restaurants, swept floors, lived in tiny rooms, and hustled every dollar he could. Yet, during this time, a new dream began forming. He wanted to teach, to share martial arts, to create something of his own. Not just a school, not just a business, but a philosophy. One that challenged tradition, broke walls, and helped people unlock their own strength. This wasn't a dream born of confidence. It came from something deeper, a refusal to live an ordinary life. Bruce Lee wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing meaning. Even if he didn't know it yet, this was the seed of Jeet Kune Do, the birth of a revolution. The first steps, small, humble, unshakable. Every giant story begins with a small first step. Bruce Lee's step looked like this: a borrowed space, a handful of curious students, a young instructor full of passion, but empty of experience. He spoke broken English. He knew almost nobody. He was 20 years old, and the world had not yet decided if it had room for him. But here's the truth about dreamers: they build before the world believes. And Bruce, he built with everything he had. His first classes weren't flashy. He didn't have money for uniforms. He didn't have a real sign outside the gym. He often slept in the same room where he trained people. But he showed up every day, every class, every moment. His students would later say, when Bruce taught, it felt like the room got brighter. He didn't teach punching and kicking. He taught confidence, clarity, and the courage to express oneself without fear. This was the foundation. This was the beginning. This was the moment he chose to step into the identity he would one day be remembered for. Bruce Lee, the teacher, the thinker, the philosopher. The dream shifts again. There is a moment in every dreamer's journey when the dream evolves, when it rises to a level that scares even the dreamer themselves. For Bruce Lee, that moment came in 1964 at the Long Beach International Karate Championships. He stepped onto a stage in front of hundreds of martial artists and unleashed a demonstration so explosive, so fast, so precise, that it left the audience stunned, not impressed, not entertained, shocked. It wasn't Chinese martial arts. It wasn't Wing Chun. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't formal. It was Bruce Lee, pure, unfiltered, unrestricted. And for the first time, Hollywood noticed. A producer approached him and said, "Kid, you've got something. Ever thought about acting?" Bruce hadn't. Not seriously. Not as a career, but something inside him whispered, "This is a bigger stage. This is a way to reach the world. This is a way to share the message." The dream grew again. The internal struggle. Most people think legends rise without doubting themselves. They don't. Bruce Lee doubted everything. He doubted his English. He doubted if America would ever accept a Chinese lead actor. He doubted if the martial arts world would reject him for breaking tradition. He doubted if the risk was worth it. But there is one thing he never doubted: his responsibility to become everything he was meant to be. In one of his journals, Bruce wrote, "I will never live an average life. I am obligated to reach my highest potential." These were not the words of a superstar. These were the words of a young man staring at uncertainty and choosing courage anyway. This is the part of Bruce Lee's dream that inspires the world today. He didn't wait to feel ready. He took action first. Confidence came later. That's how dreams come alive. The vision for Jeet Kune Do, while Hollywood opened its doors slowly, Bruce was building something even more important: a new philosophy of self-expression through martial arts. He refused to be boxed in by tradition. He rejected styles, labels, categories. He saw martial arts as freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of thought, freedom of identity. In his notebook, he wrote the words that would later become legendary: absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, add what is uniquely your own. This wasn't a technique. This was a philosophy of life, a way of living true to oneself, a way of refusing imitation, a way of embracing individuality. This dream, more than movies, more than fame, was the dream that shaped the rest of his life. The dream of Bruce Lee was not martial arts, and this might surprise you. Bruce Lee's real dream was to help people become their most powerful selves. He used martial arts as the vehicle, He used films as the megaphone. He used his body as the message. He used his mind as the guide. He was building a path that didn't exist, a philosophy that had no name, a future only he could see. This is what makes Bruce Lee inspiring. He didn't follow a path. He created one. Narrator commentary. The lessons hidden in his early journey. Every young person listening to this story should understand. *****. 1. Dreams don't start big. They start with restlessness. *****. Bruce didn't wake up wanting to be a legend. He woke up wanting more from life. That desire, raw, unshaped, messy, is the seed of every great destiny. 2. Every dreamer must leave something behind. Bruce left Hong Kong, left comfort, left familiarity, left the person he used to be. Dreams demand sacrifice, not always dramatic, but always painful. ***3. First steps look small from the outside, but they are huge from the inside. ****. Teaching 5 students in a tiny room is not glamorous. Washing dishes to pay rent is not inspirational, but these are the places where great stories are planted. ***4. Your dream will evolve. Let it grow. Bruce started with Wing Chun. He ended with Jeet Kune Do. He started wanting control. He ended wanting freedom. If your dream is changing, good. It means you are growing. ***5. You don't need to be ready. You need to begin. Bruce didn't feel prepared. He didn't feel confident. He didn't feel destined. But he stepped forward anyway. And that is why we remember his name. Chapter 1. Final message. The birth of a dreamer. Bruce Lee did not become Bruce Lee because the world believed in him. He became Bruce Lee because he believed in something inside himself, something he couldn't yet explain, but felt with every fiber of his being. A dream is not a destination. It is a direction, a compass, a promise you make to the person you want to become. Bruce Lee made that promise in a cramped room in Hong Kong and carried it across an ocean. He was not the strongest, not the fastest, not the chosen one. He was just a young man with an unbreakable refusal to live life small, and that refusal is what turned a rebellious boy into the legend the world would one day follow. Chapter 2. The Fires of Difficulty. The Path of Overcoming. There is a moment in every great person's life when the world turns against them. A moment when the path that once seemed clear suddenly twists into darkness. A moment when dreams begin to feel heavier than the body carrying them. For Bruce Lee, that moment struck not once but many times. Before he became a legend, before he became a global icon, Bruce Lee walked through storms that would have broken most men. But storms do not break legends, they forge them. And this is the story of how the storm forged Bruce. The first strike, rejection in Hollywood. Bruce arrived in America, filled with fire. He knew who he wanted to be. He knew how far he wanted to go. He knew the impact he wanted to leave on the world. He believed talent would speak for itself. But Hollywood did not listen. Producers looked at him and saw an Asian, not a star, not a lead, not a hero, just a stereotype. Bruce remembered one meeting vividly. A producer flipped through photos of white actors, each more ordinary than the last, each receiving roles Bruce could play 10 times better. Finally, the producer looked up at him and said, with the casual cruelty of someone who had never carried a dream in their hands, "You'll never be the lead. Audiences won't accept someone like you." Those words, they didn't just hit him, they carved themselves into him. He walked out of the studio with fists clenched, jaw tight, heart burning. On the surface, he looked calm, but inside, something cracked open. Some men hear rejection and shrink. Bruce heard rejection and transformed. That night, as he paced back and forth in his small apartment, he wrote 4 words that would change his life. I will show them. And he meant it. The second, strike poverty and loneliness. Hollywood wasn't the only enemy. Reality was. Bruce had no money, little food, no stable job, no path that seemed certain. He taught martial arts in parking lots, backyards, basements, anywhere people were willing to learn. He fought for every dollar. He fought for every student. He fought for every inch of progress. Most days, progress didn't come. The world doesn't reward dreamers immediately, especially not young immigrants without connections. Bruce slept little, worked endlessly, and kept going, even when exhaustion wrapped around him like chains. Every step forward was met by a force trying to push him back, but he refused to stop, because somewhere deep inside him was a voice whispering, keep moving. If you stop, the dream stops. And the dream must live. That voice carried him through nights of hunger, days of frustration, and seasons of doubt that threatened to drown him. The third strike, the spine injury that shattered his world. Then came the day that changed everything. The day the world went silent. During an intense training session, Bruce pushed himself beyond safety, something he often did. But this time, he pushed too far. A sudden snap went through his body, followed by paralyzing pain. Doctors examined him, faces heavy, words hesitant. Finally, they delivered the sentence, you may never walk properly again. You should never practice martial arts again. If Hollywood's rejection wounded him, this nearly destroyed him. Bruce lay in his bed, unable to move, staring at a ceiling that suddenly felt like a cage. His body, the body he had trained, the body he had perfected, the body he depended on had betrayed him. For 6 long months, he was trapped. His dream, threatened. His art, impossible. His identity, shattered. People imagine heroes as invincible, but Bruce was human. In that bed, he cried. He questioned everything. He wondered whether life had purpose anymore. But in the middle of despair, a different seed began to grow. If he couldn't use his body, then he would use his mind. And so he began to write. Every day, lying flat on his back, pain burning through him, he filled page after page with notes about martial arts, philosophy, energy, discipline, self-mastery, and human potential. What began as coping became creation. What began as recovery became reinvention. The transformation, the birth of Jeet Kune Do. From that bed, Bruce did something extraordinary. He redesigned martial arts. He analyzed every movement, every technique, every limitation. He stripped away tradition, ego, rigidity, and created a new philosophy. Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. These words would become the foundation of Jeet Kune Do. But at the time, no one believed in it. Traditionalists mocked him. Martial artists criticized him. Experts called him a rebel, a fraud, a kid who doesn't respect the old ways. And yet, Bruce felt more certain than ever. Every insult was fuel. Every doubt was proof he was onto something new. Every attack strengthened his resolve. He was no longer trying to fit into the world. He was building his own world. The fourth strike, prejudice from his own community. When Bruce began teaching non-Chinese students, the old masters became furious. They believed martial arts should never be shared with outsiders. They confronted him, threatened him, and then, finally, challenged him. Bruce was forced into a private fight, a fight that would determine whether he could continue teaching. If he lost, he must close his school. If he won, he could teach whoever he chose. The fight lasted only a few minutes. Bruce won, but he wasn't proud. Something felt wrong. Something felt limited. Even though he defeated his opponent, Bruce realized he could have fought better, faster, smarter. That fight didn't expose his strength. It exposed his weaknesses. And weaknesses. Bruce attacked them relentlessly. This was the true turning point. Not his victory. Not the threat. Not the outrage. But the moment he looked at his own reflection and said, "You are capable of more." Become it. The inner war, his greatest battle. People talk about Bruce Lee's physical power, his speed, his kicks, his punches. But the real battle Bruce fought, the one that shaped his destiny, was internal. It was the battle against fear, against doubt, against insecurity, against the temptation to quit. Every night, he confronted his own shadow. Every morning, he rose with sharpened conviction. He trained when others rested, studied when others relaxed, prepared when others hesitated. He refused to be less than he could be. This chapter of his life is rarely told. But this was the making of Bruce Lee. The long nights, the setbacks, the injuries, the rejections, the pressure, the loneliness, the storms. Storms do not destroy warriors. Storms reveal them. And through every challenge, Bruce learned a truth that would define his future. Obstacles are not roadblocks. Obstacles are teachers. The rising Bruce returned stronger when he finally stood up from that bed. After months of pain, meditation, writing, and rebuilding, Bruce Lee didn't just return. He ascended. His physique became legendary. His philosophy became revolutionary. His confidence became unshakable. Hollywood could no longer ignore him. The martial arts world could no longer deny him. Students began following him in droves. A movement was forming, and at the center of that movement was a man who had walked through fire. Bruce had become unbreakable, not because he avoided hardship, but because he embraced it. He didn't fear the storm. He became the storm. And now, the world was about to feel his impact. Chapter 3. Achieving Success. The calm before immortality. The morning air in Hong Kong carried a warmth that only the summer sun could offer. It was 1971, and the city was buzzing with a kind of restless energy. Buses groaned along narrow streets. Market vendors shouted prices into crowds. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of a neighborhood still waking up, Bruce Lee laced his shoes with deliberate calm. He was 31 years old. Husband, father, teacher, dreamer, and a man standing at the threshold of transformation. The struggles of the previous years had carved him into something sharper, clearer, more focused. The spinal injury that once threatened to end his martial arts career, the racism he endured in Hollywood, the financial stress, the long nights when he questioned whether the world would ever embrace his vision, all of it had shaped him into someone unstoppable. Now, as he stepped outside and let the sunlight touch his face, Bruce felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Alignment. Hong Kong, the place he once left behind, was calling him home, not as the mischievous kid who got into street fights, but as a man returning to claim his destiny. Golden Harvest, one of Hong Kong's rising film studios, believed in him. For the first time in his life, Bruce wasn't being asked to play the inscrutable Asian, the sidekick, the villain, or a faceless extra. He was being asked to be what he already was: a leading man, a force, a star. And so, the script for The Big Boss landed in his hands, a film that would ignite the flame of his global rise. He felt the weight of it, not with fear, but with gratitude, because success, when it finally arrives, doesn't feel like a lightning strike. It feels like a quiet moment of recognition. Yes, this is the path I was meant to walk. And even as Bruce stood on the edge of international fame, he didn't think about fortune or glory. He thought about responsibility. the responsibility to show the world the truth of martial arts, to inspire discipline, courage, and self-mastery in anyone who watched him. From where I stand, looking back at his journey, I realize something that young dreamers often forget. Success is not a victory over others. It is victory over the weakest parts of yourself. And Bruce had spent years fighting that battle in silence, in solitude, in small rooms with worn floors and echoing thoughts. That was why, when the opportunity came, he was ready. The birth of a global icon. The set of The Big Boss was hot, chaotic, and alive with movement. Crew members hustled between shots, adjusting lights and preparing props. Actors rehearsed fight scenes in the shade, dust rising around their feet. And in the center of it all stood Bruce, lean, focused, and impossibly fast. But it wasn't the speed of his fists that caught everyone's attention. It was his presence. He held himself with a kind of quiet intensity that demanded respect without asking for it. When he spoke, people listened. When he moved, the room shifted with him. There was no arrogance in him, only purpose. This was a man who knew exactly who he was and who he refused to be. During breaks, Bruce would sit with the youngest stunt performers, correcting their stances, teaching them how to move without wasting energy, how to breathe from the core, how to strike without tension. He never lorded his knowledge over them. He shared it freely, joyfully, like a man fulfilling a calling. One of the stuntmen would later say, "Bruce didn't teach you how to fight. He taught you how to find yourself through movement." And that was always his philosophy. Martial arts was not about violence. It was about self-expression. When The Big Boss finally released, it spread across Asia like wildfire. Theaters overflowed. Lines stretched down the streets. People cried, shouted, applauded. Something electric had awakened in the audience. The feeling of witnessing someone who didn't just act, but embodied something deeper. Bruce had become a phenomenon, not because of fame, not because of spectacle, but because people saw themselves in him. The underdog, the dreamer, the fighter who refused to bow. If you've ever chased a dream, you know the quiet moment when the world finally says, "We see you." That was the moment Bruce stepped into. The ascent continues, but success never softened him. If anything, it sharpened him further. When Fist of Fury began production, Bruce carried with him all the momentum of the first film, but also a deeper resolve. This was not just another role. It was a story about standing against injustice, prejudice, and oppression. And Bruce put his heart into every frame. On set, his fights weren't just choreography, they were statements. Statements about dignity, statements about identity, statements about the right of every human being to stand tall. And as I reflect on this period of his life, I am reminded that greatness is not built when people are watching. Greatness is built in the moments when no one believes in you, but you push anyway. Bruce didn't rise because Hollywood opened a door for him. He rose because he built a new door entirely. The films that followed Way of the Dragon, Enter the Dragon didn't just entertain. They reshaped the world's understanding of martial arts and Eastern philosophy. The man behind the legend. But behind all the glory, Bruce remained the same man Linda married. The same father who knelt to tie Brandon's shoes and carried Shannon in his arms. His heart was gentle. His love for his family was fierce. He practiced gratitude before bed. He rose with discipline every morning. He wrote pages in his journal about self-improvement, compassion, courage, and clarity. He was becoming something more than a martial artist. He was becoming a teacher for the world. The final calm. In 1973, Bruce was everywhere. Newspapers, television, billboards, magazines. The world had finally caught up to his vision. And yet, within the storm of fame, Bruce found moments of profound calm. He meditated. He reflected. He wrote about peace, simplicity, and balance. One evening, a friend asked him, "How do you stay so calm in all this chaos?" Bruce smiled softly and said, "To be calm is to be alive. I do not add to the chaos. I let it pass." His final months were filled with creation, rewriting scenes for Game of Death, structuring fight sequences with mathematical precision, dreaming of a future where martial arts would unite cultures instead of dividing them. No one knew his time was short, not even Bruce, but his peace in those final moments, his clarity, his acceptance of life as it was, became the final lesson he would leave us with. Live so fully that even a short life becomes a complete one. And on July 20, 1973, Bruce Lee's physical journey came to a gentle close. No drama, no chaos, only stillness like the final ripple on a quiet lake. But legends do not end, they expand, and Bruce's light did not go out. It simply changed form, becoming a torch passed to every person who ever dared to chase a dream. Chapter 4: The Fire That Remains. Bruce Lee's quotes, philosophies, and rules for success. The room was quiet, just quiet enough that if you closed your eyes, you could almost hear the soft rhythm of Bruce Lee's footwork, those quick, sharp steps that seemed less like motion and more like intention given physical form. It didn't matter who you were, where you came from, or whether you knew the full story of his battles, because when Bruce Lee spoke, the whole world listened. And when he lived, the whole world changed. His success was not merely a story of fame, films, or martial arts. It was the sum of his philosophies, sharpened through hardship, tested through failure, and clarified in the lonely hours where a dream either dies or is reborn. Tonight, in this final chapter, we return to the quiet of that empty room and let his voice carry through again. Not as an actor, not as a fighter, but as a man who discovered what it truly means to master oneself. The philosophy of becoming water, long before it became a global mantra. Be water. My friend began as a realization sparked in the middle of Bruce's personal storm. He once described water not for its softness, but its strategy. Water can crash, flow, adapt, reshape, slip through cracks, carve through mountains, and if forced into a cup, become the cup itself. Bruce learned this not from books, but from life. He had been rejected. He had been injured. He had been dismissed, mocked, underestimated. He had been told you can't, more times than he had been told you're good enough, and every time, he adapted. Water does not resist the obstacle, it transforms because of it. His voice echoes gently, be formless, be shapeless, be water. For Bruce, this philosophy was a rule for surviving hardship. For the rest of us, it became a blueprint for reinvention. And maybe that is why his words remain timeless. They are not instructions for fighting. They are instructions for life. The art of knowing yourself. Bruce believed the greatest opponent a person could ever face was themselves. Every insecurity, every doubt, every fear of failing in front of others, every moment where the world whispers, "You're not enough." His journals were filled with reminders to confront the inner world first. To know oneself is to study oneself in action with another person. He did not mean competition. He meant reflection. Knowing yourself is recognizing the habits holding you back, the hesitation that steals your opportunity, the fear that keeps you from speaking up, the procrastination that stops your dream from ever starting, the excuses that make failure feel acceptable. Bruce believed the purpose of life wasn't to mimic others, but to discover the edges of your own potential. Always be yourself. Express yourself. Have faith in yourself. It sounds simple until you try it. Because being yourself is a war against the world's expectations. It is refusing to shrink, to make others comfortable. It is daring to be original in a society that rewards imitation. Bruce lived by this rule with unwavering courage. He saw authenticity not as a trait, but as a discipline, the will to move forward. Success, Bruce believed, wasn't built on talent, nor luck, nor timing. It was built on motion, forward motion. Even when you doubt the path, even when the progress is microscopic, even when your dream feels unbearably far away, if you love life, don't waste time. For time is what life is made of. Bruce treated every day like a battlefield, not of violence, but of choices. He trained not just to strengthen his body, but to discipline his spirit. He studied philosophy, not to impress others, but to understand himself. He believed that doing even imperfectly was always greater than waiting for perfect conditions. He would have said to you, knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. And this rule alone separates dreamers from achievers. Because dreamers wait, achievers move. The power of simplicity. While Hollywood demanded spectacle, Bruce believed the opposite. He believed in simplicity, precision, clarity. Life, to him, was not about adding more. It was about removing what doesn't matter. It's not the daily increase, but daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential. He simplified his training. He stripped away unnecessary movements. He eliminated techniques that were impressive, but not effective. In life, he cut away distractions, negative people, meaningless pursuits, ego, noise, everything that pulled him away from his highest purpose. And isn't that what all of us struggle with? The clutter of modern life, the pressure to do everything, the temptation to compare ourselves to everyone. Bruce reminds us that mastery is subtraction. Your greatest growth will come not from taking on more, but from letting go of what isn't aligned. The courage to stand alone, before fame, before global impact. Bruce spent long years standing alone. His ideas were ridiculed. His philosophy of blending martial arts was dismissed as heresy. His belief in Asian representation in Hollywood was considered impossible. Everyone told him to follow the system. Bruce refused. He wrote, "I am not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine." That single sentence was the spirit of his entire life. To stand alone is terrifying. It is walking into darkness and hoping your conviction is stronger than fear. It is holding your dream in your hands, knowing no one else believes in it yet. But Bruce discovered something extraordinary. The moment you choose your own path, the world eventually learns to respect it. The rule of relentless self-improvement. Bruce treated self-growth like oxygen, necessary, urgent, non-negotiable. He would read for hours, train for hours, reflect for hours. Not because he wanted to be the best, but because he wanted to become better than he was yesterday. His philosophy was simple. Be a worthwhile human being, not rich, not famous, not admired. Worthwhile, someone who contributes, creates, improves, inspires. In every journal entry, there was a question he asked himself repeatedly. What did you do today to move closer to your goal? And if the answer was nothing, he did not sleep until something changed. The mindset of the warrior artist. Bruce Lee was more than a martial artist, more than an actor, more than an icon. He was a warrior artist, a man who believed creativity and discipline were not opposites, but partners. He trained like a soldier. He expressed like a poet. He performed like a dancer. He wrote like a philosopher. His rule was timeless. Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, add what is uniquely your own. This is not merely a martial concept. It is a life blueprint. You are not here to copy. You are not here to follow. You are not here to fit into a box the world assigned you. You are here to create, to choose, to evolve, to shape your own identity with intention. The legacy principle. Living with purpose. Bruce's greatest philosophy was not about punching harder, moving faster, or kicking higher. It was about purpose. Purpose is what gets you out of bed on days you feel empty. Purpose is what pulls you through setbacks that break lesser spirits. Purpose is what makes sacrifices meaningful instead of painful. And Bruce said, the key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering. He didn't mean fame. He meant impact. Every human life touches others. Every action creates ripples. Every word plants a seed in someone else's mind. Bruce believed you should live so fully, so intentionally, so passionately, that long after you're gone, your influence remains alive in the people you inspired. And that is the true meaning of success. Closing reflection. The flame that never goes out. Bruce Lee lived only 32 years. But in those 32 years, he created a legacy so vast that half a century later, people still whisper his quotes, still study his philosophy, still feel the electricity of his spirit. Every time a new generation discovers his story, his life was not long, but it was intensely lived. Every moment mattered. Every dream was pursued with fire. Every setback was used as fuel. Every achievement was carved from discipline, vision, and self-belief. If you take anything from his story, let it be this: greatness is not reserved for the lucky. Greatness is earned by the relentless. Dream boldly, to move with intention. Simplify your life. Know yourself. Be water. Be unstoppable. And most importantly, be a life worth remembering. Because that is how legends are made.